The way we affected history is by setting a model, by setting a role that human beings could be godly, could be good. I heard a beautiful story. Is that I heard this from not alive anymore, but a Hungarian Jew. He said that he was in the trains going to Auschwitz, and he stood next to a person who was a convert to Judaism, and he said they were sitting in the train, standing in the train, and what's your story? What happened? So he said, in the little shtetl that I lived, it was in Kippur, and I passed by the shul. I passed by the Jewish shul, and I wondered what the Jews do in shul in Kippur. And I looked inside, and I saw a bunch of angels. And I didn't understand what I was seeing. I was looking, and I realized, hey, no, that's Chaim the fish seller, and that's Shmerel but what happened to them? Why did they look like this? Why did they look so different? Why did they look so holy? And I realized that human beings could be holy. And then I wanted to join that people. And I asked him there in the train, did he regret his decision? He said, no, of course not. He didn't make it.
It's a very interesting distinction, I think, between the philosophy of Christianity and the philosophy of Judaism in terms of one of the central questions of all theologies, which is how do you take human beings who are limited and physical and finite and bridge the gap to an almighty God that is transcendent and infinite and totally spiritual. It seems like there's an unbridgeable gap between God and between mankind. And so Christianity offers what seems to be a compelling idea that the gap was bridged by God coming into the physical world, taking on human form, and giving people an ability to perceive him and to relate to him. And
on their terms.
Exactly. And you could see why in history that's been such a compelling idea, because it's difficult for people to relate to a God that is totally transcendent and that we can't see. So by having an image of God that people are able to see, even maybe put a little picture on their night table, it gave people an ability to feel that they have this closeness with God. But what's important is to see that in the scriptures, God doesn't say that that's going to be the path, meaning that we don't see in the Bible that this gap between God and human beings will be bridged by God coming into the world and becoming human. It takes the approach that you just mentioned, that the Torah tells us that we as human beings are to become more godly, that we're given really instructions by God. The word Torah means instructions on how that we as human beings can lift ourselves up to the heavens, to become like God. The Torah says, Kadoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani, that you shall be holy as human beings as I, God, am holy. That the entire thrust of the Bible really is not to tell us that we should expect one day to be able to relate to God because he's going to come into the world as a human being. The entire thrust of the scriptures is to teach us as human beings how we can lift ourselves up to become more spiritual, more godly, more holy. And it seems to be really, if we wanted to find one of those real dividing points between Christian thought and Jewish thought, it seems to be right here, is how is this gap ultimately going to be bridged?